MAGA weaponizes tragedy. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe. Before I start talking about the substance of what I wanted to say today, I want to give you a quick reminder that the First Amendment protects the freedom of speech. And what that actually protects is not your freedom to speak and say whatever you want to a private entity or to another person, as much as it prohibits the government from stopping your speech. The government cannot stop you from speaking, and that is important today because we just had the Attorney General of the United States, who has since retracted this and clarified it, that if you go out and speak hate, or even if you go out and talk about Charlie Kirk and what he believed in, that you are amplifying or you are spewing hate speech, and hate speech is not protected speech. Hate speech is, as much as we don't like it, protected speech. What is not protected speech is harmful speech. And the determination of harmful speech happens dependent on the circumstances and the imminence of the that harm happening. So, broadly speaking, remember that you have a freedom of speech that is freedom from the government doing anything to infringe your speech. And that includes any government entity, and that includes entities that are funded by the government. If they are funding your program or something, your school, publicly funded universities fall into that gray area. But the idea is a state actor cannot stop you from free speech, even if it is hate speech. There are laws that criminalize speech that is not protected speech. And then there is incitement, which you have to prove in court, like incitement of insurrection, for example, which was one of the charges that Donald Trump was charged with after January 6th. And as much as Donald Trump wants to rewrite that history, he's never going to rewrite the history that he incited an insurrection and the Capitol was attacked and broken into, and one of his people, Ashley Babbitt, died. Officer Brian Sicknick died as a result of being part of that. There were other officers who died because of the insurrection. And the reason why I bring that up is because I want to remind you that Charlie Kirk bused people to D.C. for the January 6th Stop the Steal rally. And you know very well how I feel about the January 6th insurrection, how I feel about that politically. So, I am not out here trying to defend Charlie Kirk's political beliefs. I'm here saying that Charlie Kirk should not have died for his words, for having the courage to go out and speak in public in places where he would be in danger. And now we are seeing, and maybe Charlie Kirk would have liked this, I don't know, or maybe he wouldn't have, that now his murder, his assassination is being used as an opportunity for Donald Trump to push his agenda. So before I continue, I want to say that there have been updates about Tyler Robinson. He has been charged with aggravated murder. I have the HTML from New York Times in the reference box so you can read about all the other charges. There have been two enhancements to those charges, including crimes in front of children and crimes carried out because of political beliefs. And we know that Tyler Robinson had been planning this for a week or so. He spoke with his transgender roommate / partner, and when the partner asked him why he did it, Tyler Robinson said that he was just tired of Charlie's hatred. And Tyler said, some hate cannot be negotiated out. So we see a motive of premeditation, planning, first-degree murder, and something as simple of an ideology of hate that this guy wanted to stop because he was against Charlie Kirk. There's no tether to any other ideology. There's no reason other than the fact that he felt that Charlie Kirk spewed hatred that drove him to it. His family said that he moved to the left while he had a transgender roommate, and they weren't. His father had a conversation with him about that, and that his family was extremely MAGA. So here we have the evolution of somebody who was a bright kid with a scholarship to go to college, who then dropped out after a semester and then went to technical college, but then didn't complete that, and then went out and shot Charlie Kirk. And we'll see how the case is brought and the story is told. And we see in the charging documents the factual brief of what happened, and all of that will be read through, and we'll go over that. And I'm sure I'll talk about it when the case and the trial starts. But what I want to warn you about today is about people like Jack Posobiec, Steve Bannon, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, who are all trying to occupy that space that Charlie had, his connection with the youth, but they're calling for a war. And by war, they don't mean an ideological war. They don't mean a war of words. They mean a real gunfight and a war. And we've seen, because of the escalating political violence in our country over the last several years, that far right is far more likely to carry out violent acts. And whether you call Tyler Robinson far left or far right will all come down to the trial and what somebody defines. But it seems to me that he is one of those people and a lone wolf who just didn't have a tether to any group, any conspiracy, any day, as you would say. There's another definition of war, and that is something that I have a contention with, that can we not talk about the war, which is a situation in which there is strong competition between opposing sides, or a great fight against something harmful? That's a dictionary definition, Cambridge Dictionary definition. And the point is, can we not say that Donald Trump is going to war against our economy, against our medical health care, that he is attacking America and sabotaging America? I believe that can be wholly separated and made an ideological point of the aggression of Donald Trump's regime on American society. But the war that they're talking about is a gunfight, is a war of going and continuing the political violence. The moment they say that far left radicals, as opposed to saying extremists, as opposed to saying the murderer, or as opposed to saying radicals. They add the left in front of it, and therefore it becomes a this versus them, a red versus blue, when really it is about madness versus governance, law and order versus chaos and death. The people who are now egging on the war, Jack Posobiec, Steve Bannon, J.D. Vance, I'll have Steve Miller be the stand-in for them and say that they have issues. Their issues have issues. They lack the basic self-awareness, and they have mastered projection. They're masters of lying while appear genuine, and they hold the ugliest beliefs in American politics today. Steve Bannon is openly racist, anti-trans, and anti-immigrant. After Kirk's assassination, Stephen Miller pledged that he would go after everybody he thought was spreading what he believed was radical leftist ideology, thereby creating this left-right division in a country at a time when that tragedy should make us stop with this sort of insightful statement by Stephen Miller, who is in a position of power, who has the bully pulpit. He wants to destroy the Democratic Party and openly attack marginalized people who do not fit into his idea of a clean society. Whether Stephen is a patsy and thereby a buffer for Donald Trump's evil agenda, or whether Stephen is an opportunistic infection on an ailing and demented brain, making the most of the residual power of the presidency, in both instances, the American people suffer. American people who do not fit into Stephen Miller and or Donald Trump's idea of who is American and who is not. We're already seeing what Donald Trump and Stephen Miller mean by cleaning the cities. With SCOTUS's blessing, Donald and Stephen can continue their roving patrols, ICE suspicion-less arrests and detentions. What was about undocumented immigrants has extended to homeless and mentally ill people. So much so that a major Fox News host, Brian Kilmeade, has the gall to say on live national television that mentally ill homeless people should be subjected to involuntary lethal injection. Yeah, he apologized about it, but that's like putting toothpaste back in the tube. A particularly alarming thing that he suggested, that the state should kill mentally ill homeless people because Donald Trump regularly adopts Fox News talking points. And so it's alarming when somebody who is a mainstay of Fox News goes out and says something like that. Charlie Kirk's assassination adds fuel to the fire, just like Stephen Miller and Donald Trump want. It gives them reason to push the most extreme positions, many of which aligned with Kirk's beliefs. Remember, he sent the bus. He sent buses of people to the Stop the Steal rally. A war on the trans community is imminent, given what's coming out about Kirk's roommate. So we should expect that and make arrangements as a society to guard and defend and protect our trans citizens and friends. Immigration raids will likely become more brutal and more frequent, spreading nationally like wildfire. Miller doesn't care about Charlie's positive ideas, like affordability, quality of life, and reaching out to the youth. And yeah, he did make a few good points. And you have to go and listen to Charlie Kirk's interviews and what he says, and there's a lot of ugliness there. But he reached out to the youth, and the youth clung on to him. Stephen Miller wants to champion Charlie's ugliest beliefs, like his open racism, xenophobia, and where he said some dead people were acceptable in order to preserve our Second Amendment rights. Most harmfully, Stephen Miller and Donald Trump's regime will very likely target media organizations and people big and small. Representative Greg Kazar said, "You see Donald Trump sending out Pam Bondi and Vance to start going after magazines, independent press, independent foundations. They're trying to weaponize this crisis in order to crush free speech." And that is prohibited because they are officers of the executive branch of our government. They are state actors. When they come after you for your speech, your right to free speech is at its highest, and the Constitution protects you. Remember this. When Stephen Miller uses the murder to suppress dissent about any idea that Charlie Kirk championed, they will go beyond Charlie's mission purpose to detain and subject mentally ill homeless people to horrors we cannot yet imagine. Charlie's death isn't a tragedy for Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Steve Bannon as much as it is an opportunity to help vault the MAGA movement at a time when its ratings were falling, at a time when Donald Trump's ratings are underwater. Charlie Kirk's wife gave a heartbreaking, breathtaking statement after Charlie's passing. She remained brave and steadfast and promised to continue Charlie's work. How she goes about it remains to be seen. She has asked for donations and help and said that the conferences will go on. She also blamed the evildoers. Now, she didn't speak left. She didn't say leftist. She didn't say rightist. She said the evildoers and they. And I hope that over time, she realizes that it was Tyler Robinson who murdered her husband. At this time, however, she's allowed to blame whoever she believes killed her husband. But others exploiting her grief to turn a tragedy into their political cudgel poses a great danger to peace in a civilian society. We must stop the narrative of they. We are all part of the they until facts surface about Tyler Robinson's motivations and the trial happens. And even after that, there was the act of one individual who wasn't affiliated with any groups, right or left. He sent out mixed messages, a history of gun use, and had a history of gun use with his family. We will find out more in the coming days, and we need to be patient about it instead of jumping the gun with every sensational conspiracy theory. To be clear, Charlie Kirk's political and social positions were extreme right, and I have nothing in common with his beliefs. I find his beliefs to be abhorrent and without sound reasoning. His charisma drove his popularity, and his courage to go into places reasonable people would consider dangerous made him stand out among right-wing activists. I don't know, nor do I wish to know more about Charlie's extreme positions. But whatever those positions were, expect Stephen Miller and Donald Trump to enhance and blow them up as their battle cry going forward. Maybe that forwards Charlie's legacy. It definitely forwards Donald's legacy. but it does very little to help the American people live productive and thriving lives. It will do little to help the good things Charlie advocated for, like affordability and the importance of a politically motivated and politically active youth. All through the debates and since Charlie Kirk's assassination, not one Republican has come out and said that we do need common sense gun legislation. We need to make gun access strictly contingent upon following regulations, a zero tolerance policy on violations, that we do mental health checks for those applying for gun permits. We need gun use education. We need periodic gun license renewals. We need gun registration and perhaps even gun owner's license. Nobody's talking about the danger of gun violence right after a right-wing activist was sniped and snuffed out from 200 yards by a high-capacity bolt-action rifle. That seems to be something Americans need to demand. So many lives have been destroyed because of unfettered access to guns in America. That needs to be regulated. And that needs to be a priority of our government. Remember, the Second Amendment says that a right to bear arms shall not be infringed, but it does not say that a right to bear arms shall not be regulated. Regulated does not mean infringed. Regulated means putting restrictions on your behavior when it comes to gun use. Is your Second Amendment completely free of any exceptions? No. Just like your First Amendment is not. Against harmful speech, against harmful conduct, against conduct that is not defense, but rather purely offensive and an attack and a murder. And finally, remember to stay engaged with all things that are happening around us. The continued attack on the press, calling out John Carl and Amish Alcindor and the Australian Reporter every single day. Donald Trump is abusing his bully pulpit and ridiculing and trying to humiliate reporters. Don't forget about the Epstein saga because the survivors need to be heard. Keep your eye on the economy. Inflation keeps going up. Affordability is lower. Jobs are going away. Its hardship is falling more and more on people. The big beautiful bill is going to cut Medicaid and SNAP. And that pain is already pinching in rural districts, in grocery stores, and energy costs that keep going up while Donald Trump undoes renewable progress and focuses on oil and coal. Remember, even Charlie Kirk advocated for affordability and the revival of the American dream so Americans can own homes and go to the hospital without going bankrupt. The impact on the environment and future generations will be catastrophic. Remember to pay attention to that. Also remember to check out Donald Trump's business engagements and crypto dealings because Donald Trump's second term is the most corrupt presidential term in American history. Yes, there's a lot happening. Don't drown in the news. Hover over it. Monitor it. Go to several sources. Listen to different opinions. Read the factual record. Make sure you get the factual record. Read primary sources like court documents, like submitted complaints and court rulings and briefings by the parties. Read peer-reviewed journals and scholarly essays like Letters from an American by Heather Cox Richardson. Her essays every day are probably one of the most important things that Americans can read on a daily basis, and I urge everybody to do so. See the bigger picture. Connect the dots between the bigger picture and the little things happening that will shape the bigger picture in the coming years. Take care of each other and stay safe. Thank you for listening.